Okay, we are now live on Facebook. I am State Representative Dafna Michelson-Janae from Colorado's House District 30, and I am so grateful to you for joining us this Sunday afternoon for our weekly 3 o'clock town hall. Today we're going to be talking about a topic that's near and dear to many people's hearts. We're going to talk about school. Don't worry, there won't be any tests at the end of this town hall, but chink. You know what? We're doing a comedy fundraiser and I'm a little bit stuck into comedy role. So I'm going to have everybody who's on introduce themselves and where you're from and tell a little bit about how COVID has impacted your school or your parenting experience, etc. And we'll start with Lori Goldstein. Lori, kick us off.
Thank you. And thank you for asking me to be here. So I play a couple of different roles in my school community. I am on the Board of Education. I'm a retired educator and I'm a parent. So from the parent's point of view, I have a 5th grader and in our district, we are being remote until at least the end of September. And we started on Thursday. Started out okay, but by mid-afternoon, there were a few challenges. 10-year-old boys don't sit still very long, but we're working on it and we're getting better. As the Board of Education, myself with my colleagues, we had to make the decision to go remote. And we were given a lot of great evidence and the plan was laid out for us and we made that decision. And then as a community member, I have all my friends and neighbors too that are dealing with the same thing. So that's how I fit in.
It's quite a time. Christy, please introduce yourself and who you are representing and how COVID has impacted you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Representative Michelson-Janae. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Christy Imholt, and I'm the District Policy Director for Aurora Public Schools. I'm here representing the superintendent and am a member of his cabinet, his leadership team. And this has been obviously a very challenging time, but a time for us to really think and plan. And so since early April, we've really been planning around COVID-19 and responding and thinking about all the potential scenarios that we might encounter as we move forward and making sure that we were ready, whether we were back in person or we were online, and making sure we were thinking about the health and safety of our students and our teachers and making sure our teachers were ready for potentially teaching remotely or at least teaching some students remotely. So it's been obviously interesting and excited to share more about the work that we're doing.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being here. Sophia, would you mind also introducing yourself and what COYAC is?
Absolutely. My name's Sophia Henry, and I'm a senior at Summit High School, which is in between like Frisco and Breckenridge, Colorado. And I'm also a member of the Colorado Youth Advisory Council, which is a group of, this year it's around 25 students, but usually around 40 students across the state of Colorado that kind of advise legislators on certain policies and proposed policies that specifically affect youth. And then we also get the opportunity to participate in panels like this and testifying during committee hearings during the General Assembly and other opportunities for civic engagement. And then as a senior, I was also a member of my district's kind of student, teacher, community, parent planning group for what this year might look like. And so we met 4 times over the summer to just kind of discuss what some strengths and weaknesses we saw with their proposed plans were. And I'd say for myself, we had the option of either doing 2 days in person, 2 days online, or choosing to go remote for the entire semester. And I opted for that option due to a number of reasons, including course selection, since our school cut back on that significantly. But my brother, who's a junior, he decided to go in person. So they've only been in person 1 day so far. We started on Wednesday, but I can also kind of share a little bit of what I've heard from his experience.
That's great, Sophia. Thank you. Carmela, will you introduce yourself and where you go to school and how COVID has impacted you and your schooling?
Yeah, hi. My name is Carmela Regos Overedia. I do prefer Mel though. I'm currently attending, yeah, no, you're all good. I'm currently attending the Colorado School of Mines here in Golden. However, I did grow up for about 10 years in your district. So yeah, I've had my fair share of living in Thornton. So I did do several clubs. I'm actually from the Mapleton Public Schools district. I was in there in the district's advisory, the student advisory council, and I even made my own LGBTQ club in my school. So I'm kind of a familiar face in the district. I am a freshman now at Colorado School of Mines. I did attend York International though. And pertaining to COVID-19, I've definitely heard a ton of complaints from my parents just because it's definitely been interesting viewing all the alterations due to COVID. And I've also heard quite a few complaints about my siblings. They've had to definitely switch up their schedules because of the pandemic.
And are you studying remotely or are you at school?
Yeah, I'm actually at school. However, I'm doing kind of a hybrid thing. So I can kind of, it kind of alters every single day, whether I go to class or not. But for the most part, it is remote.
Got it. Maria, please introduce yourself and tell us how COVID has impacted you.
Yeah, thank you for having us here, Rep. Michelson Janae. I'm really happy to be here. I'm Maria Cook. I'm a junior at George Washington High School in Denver, Colorado. My school district, Denver Public Schools, is completely online through mid-October, but probably for the rest of the semester at least. So school started last week. I've been doing online classes for the past week, so it's definitely kind of shaping just how school is day to day, but also how things like college applications are going to work out and standardized testing and stuff like that.
Thank you. And Livy, last but not least.
Hi guys, I'm Livy. Thank you so much for having us here, Representative Michelson Janae. I go to Poudre High School. I'm a junior. That's so crazy. We just had our first week of school, and we are totally online now. We were going to be a hybrid model, but we like Maria's school are now totally online at least until October, but probably for longer. And I myself have had a really positive learning experience with COVID, but I am going to do my best to speak to the experiences that my peers have discussed with me that are not so positive, like how COVID has highlighted education inequities in our district. But I think more outreach is needed in order to fully get the full picture because, like I said, I haven't experienced that.
Okay, Livy, you tipped us off to a good topic, education inequities. And when we look around at our students and what privileges they have or do not have, follows their education opportunities, it seems like, or it feels like in the community, as far as what I'm hearing from parents. So how, I'll start with you, Christy, how are you in Aurora Public Schools working to reach those kids who might not have the technology they need and or might be differently abled learners?
Yeah, so we're doing a few different things in APS to make sure that we really are trying to address those inequities, particularly as we're online this first quarter, at least through early October. One is in the spring when we switched to remote, we made sure to give out laptops or devices, Chromebooks, to make sure our students were prepared and kept those over the summer. So we gave out about 18,000 of those devices in the spring, and then have distributed another 15,000 some in August to be able to make sure our students were prepared. And then making sure we have all the information out there for internet access, right? Making sure that folks are aware of everything from hotspots that you can get through Comcast, through Internet Essentials, and really providing that tech support to families, to kids, to teachers, to make sure that we're addressing those and supporting those as best we can. We've also, as we go back now, one of the things that we'll do from the educational side is make sure that our students understand better where our students are in terms of learning. So taking some diagnostic assessments early on to see where those gaps are, to see what we need to do to be able to address any gaps that might exist from the spring. And then also make sure that we are starting supporting some of our students with disabilities by bringing them in small groups, even though most of our school is remote, bringing those in to be able to support students who might need that in-person learning.
That's wonderful. And Lori, what is Adams 12 doing in that similar arena as far as reaching students who might not have the technology needs and or might be a differently abled learner?
So we've done a lot of similar things to what Aurora is doing. We deployed out about 12,000 Chromebooks. We have probably 38,000 students in our district. Made sure that those that needed hotspots and access got it. We are bringing in our special needs, kids with special needs too, to get their services. Another thing that we're doing, we heard loud and clear from our parents was, well, what do we do if we work? And how do we make sure our kids are accessing the school? So we created learning pods, and every school has learning pods, every school through 8th grade. They're working on something similar for high school, and they start tomorrow, so I can't really tell you how they're going yet. But each school has several, and they'll group kids in anywhere from 10 to 12, maybe 15 students at the higher levels. And they go into school and they do what every other child is doing in the district, but they're being supervised by an adult. And we tapped into some of our classified staff. You might have a bus driver supervising your learning pod, but it is keeping people employed too. And they aren't there to necessarily teach you. They're just there to help you access the technology if you're having technical difficulties, and supervise you, supervise you on breaks. You'll be with other kids a little bit more too. And you'll be there the same amount of time as the regular school day. So that come back to me in a week or two and I'll tell you how that's going.
Yeah, I wondered, as a working parent myself, I'm very lucky that my son graduated high school last year, so he didn't get a graduation because it was COVID year, but I'm in this different situation where my kids are off to college. And what I want to know from our students are, technologically, how has learning been for you and what challenges have you had to overcome? And we'll start with Mel and then I'll work our way backwards.
Yeah, so I think one of my greatest challenges, at least at my school, has been the labs. And since labs are more hands-on, it's kind of been a little bit of a mess, not gonna lie. But we do have like webcams set up on top of our experiments, and we're all divided into groups of 3. And so there are 2 people who stay in their dorms and view the experiments, while there's 1 person in what we call them studios now, because they're not actual labs. And there's 1 person in the studio kind of doing the experiment. It has been difficult just because of the conversations. It's just weird. And at the same time, you kind of have to project your screen as well, because you have questions online that you have to answer. And so it's just a lot.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot, especially in a very lab heavy school.
Yeah, for sure.
Livy, what about you? Tell me about technology, and, were there things that you had to acquire that you didn't have, and were you able to access these things?
Yeah, so for me personally, right now I'm sitting approximately 7 feet from my router, and sometimes my internet still doesn't work, which is not ideal, obviously. And I know some students, particularly in the Poudre Valley Trailer Park, didn't have internet access at all, because our district solution was to bring a truck to the Poudre Valley Trailer Park parking lot with a mobile hotspot. But the problem was that the signal didn't reach to all the mobile homes. And so, and then students had to sit around the truck, which wasn't really awesome for social distancing. And also, a parking lot in the middle of a Colorado summer is not a great place to learn. But now the district has begun giving out MiFi things. I think that's what they're called. They're like little mobile hotspots, like personal ones. And so I think that will be a good solution, but we'll see. So yeah, mostly just problems with internet access, and also my own technical difficulties. I'm not awesome with technology.
Yeah, well, we're all getting a big technology lesson, and I'm not gonna lie, my internet didn't work this morning, and I was a little panicked. I'm like, it's gotta work by 3 o'clock, but here we are. Maria, tell me about your technology journey.
Yeah, so I'm lucky enough to have access to pretty stable internet and a computer, and my school district is also doing a pretty good job of distributing Chromebooks and hotspots to everyone that needs it. Obviously, there are still a lot of disparities with people not having access to internet. I know Libby pointed out the kids and students living in the trailer parks that don't have access to internet, and there are a lot of kids and classmates that I know that just don't have stable internet or internet that works. And in our last forum that we had with a few more youth representatives, we talked about like corporate and public partnerships that would allow broadband access to a lot more parts of the state. That might be a helpful solution to give more stable access to people, as well as just access generally if they don't have it already. So yeah.
Yeah, there are a lot of laws. I've worked on broadband as I've worked on education and have had COIAC represented at least one of my bills every year. I've also had a broadband bill at least every year. And there are a lot of challenges in our region making sure that we do have access, and we have to remember that. Sophia, tell me about your journey.
So luckily in Summit County, we're a much smaller district than any of the Denver districts, really. So we actually, every student from 2nd through 12th grade has a device that goes home with them every night and goes home with them over the summer. And so our biggest issue was just making sure that the kids in kindergarten and 1st grade had access to the device that traditionally stays in the building, that they then had access to that for remote learning. And then as far as personally, obviously internet is definitely something that I have struggled with. I mean, I'm sitting, like Livy said, I'm about 4 feet from the router, and I've had internet issues here as well. And then I know for a lot of families here, there's been an issue of kind of having a private enough space to do Zoom learning. And so they're like, they may be doing it in the kitchen, but someone's cooking in the background. And so that distraction, I think, has played into the remote learning a lot. And so I'm very happy that we're returning to school, even if it's just 2 days a week. And then I also work with the Summit County Government and Youth and Family Services. And we have a teen center that has reliable Wi-Fi and is right next to the library. And we're actually staffing that 4 days a week this year for students 6th through 10th grade to come and get tutoring from Colorado Learning Connections, as well as peer tutors. And then we also have like fun activities. I think there's a pool table in there and just a basketball thing. So kids can still be social on the days they're not in person. And we're staffing that from 9 o'clock in the morning till 7 o'clock at night. So that students, and we're also providing lunch and some snacks for dinner so that students have somewhere to go during the days they're not in school. And then the elementary schoolers here are going to school Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. And there's been several like day camp, summer camp programs that have extended to offer their services on Wednesdays throughout the school year to assist parents in that remote learning aspect. But I know that Wi-Fi is definitely an issue here, and it's also an issue from what I've heard on other parts of Western Colorado where they're even more rural. And so I think broadband bills is one step in the right direction, but I think a lot of districts need to start looking for immediate solutions to help their students, whether that's more, since we are back in school, whether that's more like cafes and Wi-Fi hotspots opening up and providing like their Wi-Fi so that students can still have that reliability. But then of course you get into the questionable privacy with Zoom lessons. And I think it's definitely a challenging topic in a more in a community that certainly our Wi-Fi is very affected by the mountains and the storms. And during the winter and snow, it's, you never know if you're going to have Wi-Fi or not. And we face that even with the public high school. And I think that that's really going to pose a challenge this year. But I think that as a state, we can kind of work together and hopefully get some more corporate partnerships that will facilitate that, especially in lower income families.
Excellent. Christy, now I know that Aurora Public Schools has also done things for working parents and or kids who might be alone. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we're currently offering some childcare options, particularly to our specific to our staff to make sure that our staff are able to be teaching if they're also parents, make sure that they are able to focus on their classroom students while their students are maybe engaged in learning. And so that's been one of our focuses right now, is making sure that we're able to have our staff ready and able to provide that. So we've been partnering with a number of groups like the YMCA and Rocky Mountain Kids and Boys and Girls Club to help make sure that we can create those offers. We're also, for our parents, we just launched a parent playbook to make sure that we can have, easy links and easy information for our families, and that they can also then access information in a variety of languages, because we know that that's also an important way for our families to make sure that they have access.
That's excellent. And I was going to ask, if I am a parent in Aurora or Adams 12, how do I reach out if I need some technical support or I don't have the equipment I need for my child? What should I be doing? Lori?
So we reached out to all the parents ahead of time to find out what their needs were. And when we went to back to school night, that's where they deployed the Chromebooks. They give phone numbers to call. I will say that we're still ironing out the kinks on how to get help immediately. And everybody kind of has different ways of doing it. I found out that emailing the classroom teacher was probably the fastest. But we have had some technical issues, and already they're just trying to adjust to accommodate that. For example, I think they were using Google Meet, and this week we're switching to Zoom. So that should help somewhat too.
Interesting. And Christy, same as Adams 12, you've already reached out to all the parents, or if I'm a parent in Aurora that got missed, what do I do? How do I reach out?
Yeah, definitely you can call your school directly, and they can connect you to our tech support. They can make sure you have a laptop, and our schools all have access to interpretive services. If they need information in another language, we can make sure that we provide that. Schools are the best way. Also, our parent playbook on our website on aurora-k12.org, and there's an easy, quick link to tech support as well if you are able to access that through your phone or through internet.
Okay, so aurora-k12.org is probably the source of much information regarding access and technology. So let me ask another question. One of the things that we're concerned about in the legislature is attendance, and whether or not there are those students who might be being missed, or might be choosing not to come to school, or not being able to engage with technology, and instead of asking for help, or just not showing up. And I'd love to start with the students for a moment and start with Maria. Is this something that you have heard about or seen or felt, that it would just be easier not to go to school?
I've definitely had that thought for a couple of my classes, that it might be easier just maybe not to go to that specific class, but I have noticed that in almost all of my classes, almost everyone shows up. I don't think we've had more than 1 or 2 people absent from one of my classes. That is probably different in other classes. And it's definitely an issue that kids either aren't feeling comfortable with their technology, that they don't know how to log into classes, that they or that they again feel like it's not even worth it to attend online classes if that's just not a format that is conducive to their learning. I think my specific school, not just my whole district, but my specific school's administration is doing a great job of making that information accessible by posting all of that information on Instagram and social media, and also making it available on their website and making the steps very clear and concrete. Obviously there's more things to be done, and I think a big part of that is ensuring internet access as well. But
yeah, Sophia, what are you seeing as far as attendance is concerned? And I wonder what your brother is seeing too.
Yeah, so I know when we first went online back in March, our attendance was horrible. We ended up actually last semester about 40% of the high school ended the semester with at least one incomplete, which means they just didn't turn in their work, or they didn't show up, or they basically dropped out of the class and got an F. And so that was a big concern. We also had 2 teen suicides back to back. And so after that, we decided that we would amp up our social emotional attendance. And so every Wednesday we had a mandatory advisory. If you didn't attend the advisory or didn't log on to Zoom, they would call your parents and basically ask why you weren't logging on, which is a luxury we have in a smaller district. I know not every district or school can do that. And then so far, I'm doing the remote option, which is kind of separate from the school. All of my classes are through a third-party platform called Ingenuity, but I'm still accountable to go to the Wednesday advisories for, usually they're about 40 minutes to an hour, and it's basically just catching up. The advisories are the same people for 4 years in a row. I mean, obviously, some people leave or come to the district, but it's ideally the same class for all 4 years of high school, and so that you definitely, by senior year, have bonded with those people. I do miss making waffles with them, though. That was what we did. But there are certainly ways that we've kind of tried to hold people accountable. I know for in-person school, on the days that you're in person, you're required, obviously, to be in the building unless you have some extraneous reason or you are sick, in which case they don't want you going. But even then, they follow up with a phone call like they always have if you're unverified. And I know as far as the online days, for the students in the hybrid model, that's more of a here's your assignment, it's due by the end of the day type of thing. So attendance on those days isn't necessarily taken, but I definitely think that in our smaller district, we're able to have that personal connection and that reach out if someone's not attending repeatedly. And I also think that we have the support there to kind of walk through the steps of whether it's some uncomfortable situation with technology or not a safe space to be learning, etc. And so I think kind of being able, in whatever capacity you can, to have those personal connections so that students do feel welcome, whether it's in person or online, and that they do have a sense of accountability, because I'd hate to see another 40% of my peers not be able to pass a class because they didn't show up or didn't turn in their work.
That's a pretty dramatic number right there. Libby, what are you seeing?
Yeah, I really appreciated how Sophia brought up just the impact on mental health that our isolation is having right now, because this is obviously a very isolating time. And so I think I would appreciate just some more proactive mental health check-ins. I'm not sure if this could be done on the part of our counselors, because I mean, we already ask our counselors to do a lot. And you know, we have a very big school district and a very big school in Poudre alone. But I think some proactive mental health check-ins could be really useful. Just to say, hey, how are you doing? Because students can be hesitant to do that on their own. And also, I mean, we've been a week into school, so I think people haven't gotten Zoom fatigue yet. But I don't know if that's coming. We'll see. I think we need more time to see.
Yeah, that Zoom fatigue does set in eventually. I'm not gonna lie. I think, there we go, there's Mel. I thought we lost you for a second, but somehow your picture flopped into the middle. So Mel, if you could now share with us a little bit about what does college attendance look like? I have to imagine you've just begun and you're a freshman, so you're kind of new to all of this, but what are you seeing as far as attendance goes?
I think that college definitely differentiates between, I guess, high school, because most people do attend their classes just because they do have to pay and they do have to put their money on the line, or they have to keep up their scholarships with their GPA. So I can't really relate to high school. However, I did want to bring up that when I was in high school and as a senior, how it did affect me at York. COVID as a senior, it was kind of difficult since I was experiencing senioritis, and I was one of those people who didn't show up to most of my classes, especially since most of my assignments could be done without having to attend a Zoom meeting. And just to speak on part of, I guess, my my school as a whole, we did have an issue of communicating with parents. And so if it came down to students just missing school because they don't want to attend their Zoom meetings, it was very difficult to communicate with parents who either didn't care or didn't know how to access that kind of technology. So I guess that was like my main concern.
Yeah, so I'm going to ask Christy and Lori to answer this question, but I'm going to ask you to add on to it. Livy brought up the topic of mental health, and I know that both of your districts have been exceptionally proactive with mental health resources and mental health services. How has that changed? If you could add that to the back end of your answer about how you're handling attendance and how you're managing that. And we'll start with Christy on this one.
Yeah, it was really nice to hear from many of the students that importance of relationships, because it's not the same connecting in person as it is connecting this way. And so that's been one of the things we've really focused on, both with our teachers and our students, is saying, let's start from the beginning. We know this is a challenging time. There's a lot happening in the world, from COVID to the tensions around racial injustice to so much happening in the world. And so focusing on those relationships and focusing on that social emotional learning piece as the foundation for that work. And so really doing that both in the classroom, but then also making sure we, in the spring, moved all of our behavioral health supports, access to counselors, access to social workers online and remotely. And so students continue to have that. And we were really fortunate that that our voters approved in 2018 a mill levy to be able to expand our counseling offerings. So us being able to have counseling offerings for elementary school allows us to make sure that we're really able to say, you know, if there's a student who has a need and a teacher sees that, how do they connect them right away to that counselor? And so that those are accessible for all students and really able to support that. So really focusing on that relationship, and then also making sure that, you know, we do follow up with families and try to troubleshoot from the school level. Is it an internet access barrier? Is it tech barrier? Is it a timing barrier? What are the things that are getting in the way? Because we know it'll be different for every family, and how can we make sure we're helping support and try to troubleshoot and get folks connected to those right supports and services.
That's great, and I was so happy to see that that passed. Lori, how are things in Adams 12?
So we too had passed a mill back in 2018, and we invested heavily in social emotional education, and we had hired social emotional teachers in all our elementary schools. And when we went into quarantine last spring, they continued, where they actually did have a Zoom meeting every week, at least in my son's school, with kids who had regularly touched base with the social emotional teacher so that they could keep that connection. This year, it's been a topic of conversation. We know that kids are going to need that, and it's important that we know every kid by name, strength, and need. And maybe it's possible some of the small groups that we have meeting in the schools are going to be just kids bonding with somebody in the school. I know that part of the plan is to put kids into small groups at times where they can talk with each other without 30 kids there. So that will also be an option. But it's something that we're very concerned about, more than almost anything else, because we have had a lot of experiences in the past that have not been good in our district with our children, and we need to stay on top of that.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's true for us statewide. And as you know, well, something that I work on every year is youth mental health and suicide prevention. And I know that these teens who are with us today and these young adults are really part of the solution. And I'm so grateful for all of you for being here. So here's a tough question, a hardball question. If you had to find a silver lining, in what has been going on in our communities, what would you say that silver lining is? And whoever wants to go first, jump in.
All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and jump in. I have been thinking about this a lot because, as I mentioned previously, we did have some struggles in our community, especially at the beginning, of what's good about this and how can we be hopeful in such a time of uncertainty. And I think one of the biggest benefits of COVID has honestly been the accessibility it's created for moments like this, for people across the state or the nation or even the world to come together and have these important conversations while not having to leave their house. And I definitely think like it's helped me a lot kind of pursue my interests with public policy. I've been able to talk with county commissioners from the Western Slope to district attorneys and all sorts of other people I normally never really would have interacted with. And it's really just been by like people like you, Representative, hosting town halls like this to get people engaged and kind of bring this back. And in Summit County, we did a series of interviews where like youth from our Youth Empowerment Society went out and interviewed prominent leaders like mayors or sheriff deputies, or I interviewed the superintendent, and we've interviewed school board members. And now we're going to interview State Representative Julie McCluskey, as well as her opponent from Breckenridge, Kim McGahee, just to kind of help people be more aware before the election and kind of get to meet these people. So I think it's really improved our ability to connect with people outside of our general social circle, as well as outside of our town and our local community.
That's awesome, Sophia. Those are some great silver linings right there. Who else has a silver lining they'd like to share?
Something that's really been helping me get through this is just thinking about what's good. So I really appreciate this question. And thank you so much, Sophia, for sharing. I completely agree. I love that we've been able to do so much civic engagement now more than ever. But also something that's come out of this pandemic highlighting the extreme disparities that exist in our society is that more concrete work has begun to address them now that they've become so painfully apparent. And I wish it didn't take a pandemic to begin work, but I'm glad it started now, and I hope it continues. In addition, this is just me specifically. I've been getting to spend a ton of time with my awesome family. I love my family, and it's just been awesome to be trapped in a house with them. Also, I really appreciate how wonderful my school is, and that I get to just keep learning, and that I can just keep being engaged with content.
That's beautiful, Livy. And my silver lining was my family also. And I recognize the privilege that I have that I was able to be with both of my children during this really, scary time. Who else has a silver lining?
I was going to say the exact same thing as Livy. I think this has, unfortunately, it's taken a pandemic to reveal the systemic inequities in our society, and especially in our education system, as well as our criminal justice system, obviously. But yeah, I think this pandemic has created a focus on the needs to make things more accessible. I think it's emphasized how valuable our teachers are and how amazing they are to be able to adjust to these extreme circumstances and still support their students. And also it's emphasized our need to extend mental health resources and work towards the destigmatization of mental health and utilizing mental health resources that we have available. And obviously our national reckoning with racial injustice in this country and the horribly racist system of policing that we have in this country. Again, it's horrible that we needed a pandemic for us to realize this, but I do think that more concrete work is happening as a result of it.
Amen. Amen. Mel, you have a silver lining for us?
Yeah, so I, for one, definitely believe that technology is the future. And that's one of the main reasons as to why I became an engineer and why I'm going to an engineering school. And I think that it's definitely that this whole pandemic has definitely helped students understand technology and grow their relationship with technology. And I know that it'll prove useful in the future with whatever they choose to pursue.
I couldn't agree more. Lori, Christy, either of you have silver linings, or both of you, hopefully. Lori?
I think it's basically forced a lot of us to be problem solvers, whether it's coming together and collaborating as a district, because that's what, in our district, we had all the stakeholders come to the Zoom room to determine how we were going to navigate through this. And we had the staff on board, we had a few kids on board, and it forced us to come up with some solution to this big problem that we've never seen before. I mean, we're basically all, what do they say, building the plane as we're flying it in all aspects of our lives. And I think just looking at the things that we're coming up with and finding what works and what doesn't, it really is rewarding in some ways.
Yes, and Christy.
I think my silver lining is kind of a combination of where Lori is finishing us and Sophia started us, which is it's around that connection and collaboration. I'm on Zoom calls every week with colleagues from across districts, and where we're really sharing ideas and best practices and saying, okay, we don't have to do this alone, right? We don't have to do this as school districts alone. We don't have to do this alone as a single district. We need the full community, and our community's been incredible in stepping up, particularly to help make sure that we're distributing meals to our students and to our families. And so it's been really tremendous to see the village come together.
I do have to say, I believe Shannon Solomon is one of your people, and you all have done an amazing, amazing job. And here's a secret. I had a day dedicated to the school lunch workers around the state. And unfortunately, with all of the COVID mess, it's taken me longer than necessary to get this out to her. But there's going to be a recognition of Shannon and all of the school nutrition workers around the state as soon as we can get our act together on that. But shh, it's a secret. We did get a comment on Facebook from Jenny Davenport, who's one of my constituents, and she says that in School District 27J we have advisory, and as a committee member, I'm a part of helping to make sure we place emphasis on the social emotional needs of our students. With the increased racial tensions and upsetting weeks behind us, what are some of the initiatives being put forth as part of that mix? And Jenny, it's like you're reading my mind. That was my next question. How is this awakening impacting school? Is it impacting curriculum? Is it impacting after school activities? How is it impacting? And Livy's got a huge smile on her face, so I'm gonna go to Livy first.
I am so sorry. Something weird is happening right there. Could you please repeat the question?
Yes, with the whole awakening, the racial awakening, if you will, about going on in our, boy, I'm eloquent today. The racial awakening going on in our world. How is that impacting your schooling?
Well, this is a super important question, obviously, and it is, for me as like a white person, it is upsetting, absolutely, and it is stressful, but you know, I consider myself lucky because as painful as it is for me to watch another human being being murdered in the streets for doing nothing wrong, I can't imagine someone who's of color or Black specifically to watch this being circulated over and over again and knowing that it could be them or someone they love. And so I feel that stress on myself in schooling, but I would like to highlight that I can't imagine how stressful that might be for a person of color.
Thank you for that, Livy, and absolutely. Mel, do you see any initiatives going on in school at Mines?
Yeah, a little bit actually. So we do have a couple of groups of minority support groups in general, and they've definitely stepped forward with their thoughts and even joining protests in order to fight this racial injustice that we're facing still to this day. And I also just wanted to mention that Black Lives Matter.
Black lives do indeed matter, and thank you for saying that. Sophia, what's been going on in Summit?
Well, we actually just elected a new superintendent, and he is the first African American superintendent that Summit School Districts has ever had. So I'm very excited about that. He comes with a lot of experience from more diverse areas. Summit is about 91% white. So more diversity in that sense, and he started a lot of equity initiatives when he worked in Seattle, which is where he just came from. And so I'm hoping that we can see a lot of that, because even though we are 90%, 91% white as a community, our school is 40% Hispanic and Latino. And so it definitely is not proportional to the general population. And I think a lot of people in our community kind of disregard that such a large part of our school is in that situation. And luckily here we live in a very supportive community, but I've still seen a lot of kind of the community support for that demographic that is definitely concentrated in one area across the community. It's not there. Instead of building a community center, they just built 12 new affordable housing units, and so far they've had 4 applications in the last 2 months because that's not what the community needed. And so I think as far as that, I actually took one of the reasons I wanted to do online school was so that I could invest more time into kind of investigating the social justice initiatives going on in my community and how to educate my peers, because I think that growing up in a certain demographic that Summit County has, you're very isolated and you don't really see the perspective of anyone in the Front Range or the city or even other cities across Colorado. And so I am starting a series of youth town halls to meet with local representatives, but also like just youth discussions to get everyone kind of on the same level so that they don't feel intimidated by meeting with these authorities, because that's what I've heard is a big kind of barrier, is that DACA students and other undocumented people are like, I don't want to speak up because maybe my status will get rescinded. And so I've been trying to host these. So far I've done one, and I'm planning to do more as the semester progresses. And I think that initiatives like that go a long way. And then I saw in the comments it also talked about social emotional learning and kind of the mental health supports and initiatives that way. And I think, in my opinion, it would be wonderful if mental health first aid training became as common and as mandatory as CPR and first aid. I think, if anything, it's more applicable. And I know you're a big proponent of that as well, Representative, and I'd love to see that go further. I think teachers should be trained in that. I think a lot of community members that work with children should be trained in that, because that's what a lot of students don't feel comfortable reaching out to the psychologist or the counselor that's in the school. But if they can just start the initial conversation with someone they're comfortable with, like a teacher or a mentor or somebody like that, then the conversation can begin and they can get referred to the help they need without slipping through the cracks of our broken mental health system. So that's something I'd like to see statewide as an initiative, and it's definitely something I'm trying to get my district to accept, because I think you're more likely to save a life with that training than you are with CPR, in my opinion. And from the experience that we've had recently in Summit School District, I think that's also the case.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. Maria, how have things been at George Washington?
Yeah, so my school district, Denver Public Schools, we recently ended our contract with the Denver Police Department, which I think is something that all school districts should do, because I don't think that cops have any place in our education system whatsoever. And we're looking at reinvesting those funds into things such as mental health support, equity initiatives, things like supporting our teachers more, and also hiring more educators of color, because that's a huge problem in our school district, is that we just don't have educators of color for no reason. And then also like introducing curriculums like Black Studies and Indigenous Studies and Latinx Studies into making those graduate requirements, so that everyone is just more educated and less ignorant about certain issues. Also at my school specifically, we're one of the schools that has the International Baccalaureate program, and that is something that is notoriously inaccessible and inequitable, very racially biased. So at my school, we're working towards some equity initiatives with making the IB program and also AP classes a lot more accessible for students of color and students from lower income families.
That is so great to hear, Maria. I'm very pleased to hear that. Lori, tell me about what's going on at Adams 12.
We definitely want, have an increased awareness of, racial and disparity. And it's really critical that we deal with that. And part of it too is just by, we have to level our playing field and making sure everybody does have access to education in the best way possible. I think we've given out almost 1 million meals since we went into quarantine for people with, that need, just, by how we, and also how we deal with the materials that we give to our students that need them. We have not decided to get rid of our school resource officers in our district, but we want to make sure that they are equipped to deal with mental health concerns with the students, because that can make it a positive. We want our students in our school to have positive experiences with our resource officers, but we are closely monitoring that, and we are monitoring where those disparities occur.
Thank you for that. And I believe, Lori, maybe I'm incorrect, but Adams 12 did a major mental health first aid training program in the district too. Am I correct with that? Does not look like I'm correct.
I just don't know.
Okay. One of the districts just did a major mental health first aid implementation throughout the school district for teachers. And the more mental health first aid we can get out there, the better off all of our schools, teachers, and students will be. Christy, how has this impacted Aurora? I know Aurora has been deeply impacted. How has that translated into the schools?
Yeah, so in a couple of ways. One, which is some of the early training, in addition to making sure our teachers were ready for online instruction, some of the early training we've really focused on this year with our teachers was around that mental health. And last year we did begin expanding some of the youth mental health first aid training for our teachers, but making sure that we talked about this going into this year, and particularly with everything going on in Aurora, with the conversations around Elijah McClain, really making sure that we are speaking to what is happening and understanding that students are coming to school into those conversations with lots of thoughts and lots of ideas, and and lots of social emotional needs around having these conversations. So really making sure that that was part of the work that we were preparing our teachers to engage in those conversations. We're also continuing the second year of our work, our Young Men of Color initiative in APS. We started last year focused really trying to work with the community and bring about 10 different community groups in to work with young men of color to really try to, knowing this is an area we have work to do, and thinking about how we can learn from those who have been particularly successful and partnering with them and partnering with a number of our schools to be able to support our young men of color. And then we're also, thanks to our board's real focus on equity, are focused on strengthening our recruitment and retention of teachers of color. So we've started working and participating in a Denver Area Talent and Equity Consortium with a group called Promise 54 that's giving us the chance to look what's going well around our diversity, equity, inclusion work, and where there are opportunities that we need to be focusing on and addressing moving forward. So we're really, I think, the timing, it's important timing for us to be engaging in that work moving forward.
So important, so important. And I myself have spoken to a couple of our community colleges and Metro to talk about how are ways that we could be recruiting more students of color to become teachers. So, we have that balance there. We also still have the balance with, we have to pay teachers well enough for families to live. So we have all of these things that we're working on balancing that I think will help bring us a more diverse workforce. And that includes actually paying teachers a living wage. So my final question for the day is, what are your hopes and dreams for your students this year, for your peers this year, for yourself this year? What are the things that you most hope to see by the end of this school year? Sophia, why don't you start us off?
Well, I meant to say this earlier as part of my silver lining answer, but I think COVID has kind of unveiled a pathway of non-traditional education for a lot of people. And I think that that's a reasonable and considerable alternative for a lot of people that struggle in the traditional public school environment. And so I think, like for me personally, my grandma lives just around the corner from my family, and she was a college professor for over 30 years and did not like the idea of me doing remote learning and not continuing with the International Baccalaureate program. And she thought that that was going to be a disservice to my further education and all of this stuff. And I realized at that moment that I'm still going to be pursuing an education, but I'm going to be pursuing an education that is meaningful and something that matters to me. And so this year I'm definitely taking a more civic oriented approach with kind of filling my schedule with, obviously, physics and calculus and those classes, but also human geography and sociology and AP government and politics and other classes to expand myself in that way that, at least in Summit County, we basically took history for 4 years, and that was your education. And so I'm starting to kind of think about all the different things I could do now that I have some more time, since I'm doing online school, which, as we all know, goes by a little faster than being in person during the day. But I think I would love to see all of my peers kind of sit down and think about what their passion is, regardless of what they want to study in college, or if they want to go to college, or what they want to do after high school. I think they should sit down, think about what their passion is, and then pursue that. I think, at least in Summit County, we emphasize a higher education after high school. And I think for a lot of people, that's not the best pathway. I think that vocational school and trade schools and community colleges, and then figuring out what you want to do, is a better way, because then you don't incur hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt for an education that you weren't sure about. And so I think now is kind of a great time to revisit our traditional education system and evaluate it to see how we can better support every student as a high schooler and prepare them for success regardless of what they want to do. Whether, I know Summit County, we have bike tech classes and ski tech classes and welding and electrical and stuff like that, but none of that's happening this year because of COVID. And also a lot of those classes require having a bike or having skis or having a way to transport that from your house to the high school. And so that again poses an equity issue when you have students that don't have cars to transport that or don't ski up here, which is definitely a big thing because there's a lot of people that can't afford to ski since it is a resource-oriented sport. And so I think if we kind of expand as a state, expand our curriculum of vocational and right-to-work certificates, then we can prepare students to go right into the workforce if that's what they desire, or they can go to college and they can just kind of continue with their passion. Because I really do believe that if you take your passion seriously and are shown what a good work ethic and ambition will get you, that you will be able to have a comfortable life wherever you are if you take the time and energy to pursue that passion and educate yourself in the workforce that you are in. And so I think right now is a perfect opportunity to reevaluate where we are with education and realize that the traditional system of higher education is certainly not for everyone.
Very beautiful, Sophia. Mel, what are your hopes and dreams for your peers during this time?
I am going to be honest and just say that I hope that we all stay motivated for the rest of the, 4 years since I'm barely starting, but since that was a really big issue for me personally, I'm sure that a lot of people experience this as well. And so I just really hope that they keep that passion that they have as engineers to continue and motivate themselves throughout the rest of their career.
Good. I like honesty, and I think that motivation is going to be really tough for some. So I hope the same. Lori, what are your hopes?
So I'm going to go over to the other side of the spectrum in terms of my hopes. I mean, I hope all the students are successful, don't get me wrong. But I hope that the people of Colorado really learn to appreciate the importance of public education and realize the difficulties that we as a state face in terms of how we fund Colorado public education, how we pay our teachers. I mean, our teachers are some of the worst paid in the country. And every teacher I've ever met is so dedicated to the jobs that they do. And they, they don't do it for the money. And I hope that our public realizes that we need to invest more resources in public education so that we can better offer opportunities for career and technical, like, in Summit High School, because, we are fortunate in Adams 12 that we can do that. And that we can offer all these different career opportunities for kids, because we struggle. I mean, we've really had to piece together a lot of different pots of money to get through this. And I'm thankful that the legislature and the county in Adams County, the commissioners, have given us resources so that we can deliver our instruction at this time. But hopefully we're going to get back to being somewhat the way it used to be, in person at least. But we definitely are under-resourced monetarily.
We certainly are, and I hope for in person as well. Livy, what are your hopes and dreams?
Well, thank you. I really appreciate all of the goals that everyone has shared. I'm just inspired by you all, and I'm glad that I get to listen. But I would like to focus on 5 different levels, just working from the state level down. So for the state level, I would just like all of my peers across the state of Colorado to not be afraid to ask for help during this time, because I think it's important that we be self-advocates to try and get the resources that we need, and also that the state can help in facilitating important conversations to make sure students are supported. At the school district level, I loved Maria's idea of having Indigenous and Latinx and African studies as part of a graduation requirement, so that way students have to be educated on other cultures and how to approach learning about other cultures in order to move on with the rest of their lives. Also in our district, I hope we get more leadership of color, because our leadership right now does not represent the demographics of our district. And then at the school level, I hope that we, first of all, get rid of our student resource officer, just to, once we, of course, go back to school, because obviously we don't see our school resource officer at our homes. I mean, I don't think he's here, but you never know. Because at school, I just think school resource officers make students of color, especially Black students, feel threatened, and we ask them to do too much. Instead of a school resource officer, I think that money should be directed into an extra mental health professional who's more specifically trained than perhaps our counselors are. And then also on the teacher level, I hope that our teachers just remain as stress-free and reminded of how special and incredible they are as possible. And that includes having a reasonable pay that Lori said, which I love, that they can actually live on, because especially of how incredible our teachers are in PSD. I mean, they are the most incredible teachers I've ever had. And it's terrible that their pay doesn't reflect that. I'm glad that they're just selfless enough to do it, even though we haven't recognized how amazing they are. And then for my peers, I hope, like I believe Sophia said, that they just remain empowered, and that Mel said that they remain motivated as well, even in these challenging times. So, yeah.
That's a lot of good hopes and dreams there, Livy. Christy, what are your hopes and dreams for our students?
Our hopes and dreams are really that we're setting you all up for success, for what that is, whatever that decision is, as Sophia said, whatever that future is for students, for our students in APS, for all of you, that we're setting that up, and that you've got the support to be able to do it, from the academic to that social emotional learning, and that we're setting our teachers up to have that support to adapt to this new and different environment, our teachers, our parents, our principals, all of our leaders, so that we can really meet that goal of making sure that you can continue on the path that you're hoping for.
And Maria, with the final word.
Alrighty. I have a lot of hopes and dreams for this year, so I'll keep it brief. But firstly, I really like what Lori said about a renewed appreciation for public education and our teachers, which will hopefully lead to us financially supporting our teachers in an appropriate way, in a more comprehensive way that, yeah, will allow them to live on their salaries. And yeah, and then also I hope that my district and my school follows through with its ideas for reinvesting the funds that we have from ending our contract with the Denver Police Department and reinvesting that in mental health resources, reinvesting that in equity initiatives. And Olivia, I know you said you talked about like making those courses required for graduation. That's something that one of our leaders, Tay Anderson, on our school board has really captained, and I really appreciate his leadership. I think he's done a lot of amazing things for our school, for our district, and he is also the youngest Black elected official that our city, I think, that all of Denver has ever seen, and his leadership is incredible. Yeah, so I appreciate him a lot, and I hope that we do reinvest in those programs. And lastly, I hope that my peers and youth that are able to vote are registered and exercise their right to vote and hit the polls, so we can hopefully elect some more leaders that are enacting this type of change.
Well, I just cannot think of a better way to end this. And, you know, Lori, you brought up some good things. We'll continue to lobby our school boards to spend more money on teacher salaries, that they get more money from the state, that we get more money from the feds, and the whole circle of money and dollars starts to come into play as we go through this next election. So yes, please get out there and vote. All of you who are registered to vote. If you're not registered to vote, just go onto the Secretary of State's website at Josh, you're gonna have to put the Secretary of State's website.
VoteColorado.org.
VoteColorado.org. Thank you so much, Lori. Just go to VoteColorado.org and register to vote. Thank you, Christy and Lori and Livy and Mel and Maria and Sophia, for sharing your experiences. And let's go have a great school year. Bye, everyone. Thank you.